moment present, and followed by generate a good intention, motivation for being here. So make yourself relaxed, comfortable. To let go any stiffness, tightness in your body, mind. Feel the weight of your body on cushion, chair. And breathe in naturally, normally. And as you breathe in and out naturally, try to keep your mind watching mindfully and being aware. As you inhale, being aware you are inhaling. As you exhale, being aware you are exhaling. Just watching and being aware. Then we can try to generate good motivation, intention for being here. We can contemplate, think. As long as we have those afflictive emotions arising in our mind. No matter what the external conditions are. Even when you have good health, good place, good weather, good friends, families, good job. Even when all the external conditions seems to be very conducive, good, still we can find ourselves being miserable, unhappy. dissatisfied, disturbed. The reason why we become agitation, disturbance, miserable is because of our own mind. Because one of those afflictive emotions manifesting arising. That being the case, as long as we have those afflictive emotions, we can never find lasting, true inner peace, joy, happiness. Regardless how perfect the external conditions are. Therefore, in order to have more inner peace, stability, calmness, true lasting joy, happiness, we need to work our mind, reduce and eliminate those afflictive emotions. Because if we don't have those afflictive emotions, even the external condition might not be the best and perfect. We can still be happy, satisfied, content, and peaceful. And in order to reduce and eliminate those afflictive emotions completely from the very root of it, one need to cultivate the actual antidote. The wisdom relies on the emptiness within our mind stream. And in order to generate the wisdom relies on emptiness, we need to contemplate, meditate, practice correctly, continuously. And for that, we need to be reminded of the practice, be inspired, encouraged to practice. For that very reason, that is why we have come here to listen, to reflect, contemplate, and to engage in the discussions. And to have more imprint about emptiness in our mind stream. So that it becomes easier to understand and to practice and to develop realization in the future. May our act of coming here together, listening, reflecting, contemplating, may all these become cause and conditions to achieve our highest potential, the fully awakened state, as soon as possible. So not only we can be help and benefit, but to be greatest help and benefit. And not only for some, but to each and every sentient beings. Okay, so then we do the refusion Bodhicitta. Sangye Sherab Sangye Chonam Pa Chanchu Padu Dani Kapsu Shin Dagi Geshe Nipe Sonami Lola Benche Sangye Drupa Sho Sangye Sherab Sangye Chonam Pa Chanchu Padu Dani Kapsu Shin Dagi Geshe Nipe Sonami Lola Benche Sangye Drupa Sho Sangye Sherab Sangye Chonam Pa Chanchu Padu Dani Kapsu Shin Dagi Geshe Nipe Sonami Lola Benche Sangye Drupa Sho So yesterday we discussed about why we need to study the Sutra practice, because we need to cultivate the wisdom realizing emptiness, because that is the only way to eliminate all the afflictive emotions completely, permanently, from the very root of it. And so we have to understand how that is, how that wisdom relies on emptiness can cut all the delusions completely. And in order to understand that better, we need to understand how different afflictive emotions, different those disturbing negative emotions arises from that fundamental ignorance. If you know that how those delusion arises from that ignorance, and then you know if you can get rid of ignorance, then all the delusion will not arise anymore, because they arises from that ignorance. If we don't understand that, then if we don't really understand that, then we might not feel the possibility of eliminating the delusion completely. It sounds good idea, that you can get rid of all the delusions completely, but is it possible? But is it possible? Sometimes we have doubt, It's a great idea that that you can achieve liberation, nirvana, that is totally free from all the delusion, permanently, completely. But then sometimes we wonder, is it really possible? Sometimes it feels like maybe it's not possible. It's just a nice, good idea. And that is because we haven't really understood how each of those delusions arise from that fundamental ignorance. And if we understand how all the delusions arise from that fundamental ignorance, and how that ignorance is totally mistaken mind, and through wisdom realizing the ultimate truth, how that can overcome that distorted mind, then you would say, oh, absolutely it's possible to achieve the liberation nirvana. Then you begin to have some understanding the possibility of overcoming the delusion completely, the possibility of liberation and nirvana is something possible. It's not just a great ideas or just a great ideal aspirations, but that actually is possible. And when you feel it is possible, it gives you much more enthusiasm in your practice. Much more enthusiasm in your practice. When you don't feel it is possible, then it doesn't give you so much enthusiasm, in your practice. Recently, a few months ago, I was in Europe, and there was someone who was translating for me in Germany, okay, from English to Germany, and we were going to Rishantideva's text, and she's really a good translator, and she says she is also mindfulness kind of teacher. She does mindfulness training and like that. But the idea that delusion can be completely overcome, to her, it was totally new to her. She keep on in our personal discussions. She doesn't feel that delusion can be overcome, completely overcome. Therefore, the approach of just being, watching when delusion arises, watching and trying to be kind of what you call equanimity, not being judgmental, seems to better for her at the very beginning. But as we discuss personal, then she started thinking that because if it's not possible to get rid of that, then what she says has a point. But if it is something can be get rid of it completely, then we should try to eliminate completely, because as I mentioned yesterday, even it's very subtle and not intense, very light, and even it's not arising long time for long duration, even it's not arising frequently, still is a problem. As long as I have a headache, even for just momentary, is a headache, which I don't want. Even it's momentary, even it's not so frequent, still is a problem. And of course, when you talk about liberation, nirvana, fully enlightenment, it's absolutely not possible to overcome that. So anyway, So in order to understand that, we really have to understand how all the delusions are rooted in that ignorance. How that ignorance is giving rise to all the delusions. And we have to understand and realize from our own experience, through our own contemplation, meditations. Not because the Buddha says, Narayana says, Lama Tsongkhapa said, and that. They said that, then we do our own individual analysis. And through our individual analysis, exercises, meditations, then you come to, conclusion is absolutely correct as they explain, with your own individual, our own individual understanding. That is important. So just as Chandrakirti says, first there's a sense of grasping of self, truly existing self. On the basis of that, then there is truly existing of mind, my body, my experience, my feelings, my mind, and then my friend, my things, and then my enemy, and so on. On the basis of that, then we generate attachment to some, aversion to some, and on the basis of that aversion and attachment, many other delusions arises. And through that arising of those delusions, as I mentioned yesterday, it immediately, the moment those delusions arise, it disturbs your inner peace, joy, happiness. It robs you of your peace and happiness. It takes away. And not only that, then we create more negative karma. Not only we create more negative karma, we experience such result in the past, but each time we generate those negative emotions, it creates more stronger imprint in our mind to have that kind of habitual reactions. Do you get it? If I'm getting angry, and when I get angry, if I don't try to stop it, but allow to be more angry, that way of habitual pattern of your mind gets stronger and stronger. And then you can easily be upset and angry with even small things. Even small things trigger you to be upset and angry because your mind is so habitual in that way of thinking, because strong imprint. And that is why it becomes so difficult to overcome the delusions, because the imprint is so strong. Because the imprint is so strong. So, Chandrakirti explained that way, and Dharmakirti, he explained slightly different, but it's the same. He talked about first there's, grasping or independent self. On the basis of grasping independent self, then there's concept or grasping or independent others. On the basis of independent others, and then, within that, then we, again, independent friend, independent enemy within the others, and then, attached to the friends, aversion to the enemy. On the basis of such aversion, attachment, aversion, again, all the other negative emotions arises, and again, all the problem arises from there. So that is what they explain, but then we have to really go deep in ourselves, in our own experience, and try to see whether that is the case, whether that is that the really way, is that true as they explain or not, to be able to, you look at that, when we have a grasping of the self, how does the self appear to your mind when you think of me or I or self? Especially when you have a strong feeling of that self, the self. So, isn't this sense of self that appears, there is the sense of I or me or self by itself from its own side. There's appearance of that, and not only there's appearance, don't we perceive that way, the way it appears to ourselves. That's how, if you check your mind. First, how does the self or the I or me appear to I or self or I or me appear to your mind? Is there a sense of appearance of self existing from its own side, objectively there? Not only there is appearance, next, how do we perceive? Sometimes there is not be sudden appearance, but you might perceive differently. So there is appearance, and next, do you perceive that way, the way it appears, or do you perceive differently? If we check it, there is that appearance, and then we perceive the way it appears. There is, the self that exists by itself, objectively. And when we perceive the object here, the self, to exist by itself from its own side, objectively, then there's grasping to that object. There's grasping to that object. The grasping to the self. And when there's a grasping to the self, due to the grasping of the self and clinging to the self, then there is attachment to the self. There is attachment to the self. Clinging, grasping, and then attachment to the self. And because of that attachment and, the cherishing thought for the self, because of that self, then there's a cherishing thought. There's the attachment and cherishing thought for the self. Not only cherishing, overly cherishing. On the basis of that, then, whether it's external object or internal object, anything that we feel is helpful to this self, helpful to me, is good for, is nice to this self. This self might need that object. That object might be helpful to this self. That object give me happiness, cause of happiness. Anything we perceive that way, then we get attached to all these objects, whether it's external or internal. First, there's a grasping to that self, and attachment, and cherishing, and then on the basis of that, any object we feel or we perceive that is good for this self, need for this self, will be nice to this self, will be helpful to this self, will give happiness to this self, then we feel we need all these objects. We have attachment to those objects. Grasping, attachment to all these objects. That's how attachment arises. On the other hand, the moment we feel and perceive, whether it's the external object or internal objects, and that is not good for me. This is not good for that self. That is not something this self needs. It's not useful for that self. It's harmful to that self. It gives suffering to this self. Then we have aversions. We have aversion towards any of those objects. Any object that we feel or perceive that way, related to that self. And that's where the aversion arises. And then from that attachment and aversions, as I mentioned, and many other delusions, many other disturbing negative emotions arises. Fear, worry, anxiety, suspicious, jealousy, pride, all those different mind that disturb our mind arises. Through those arising those mind, it again, it disturb our mind, disturb our peace, and then also it lead us to the problem. And so first, there's the grasping of the self existing by itself from its own side. On the basis of that, then there is projections to the objects. This is good. I need it. Its health is that object is good, helpful, beneficial, happiness, cause of happiness, that is good for this self. That object is not good, bad, harmful, this and that. We project to the object in that way, and that is not good for me, that is something harmful to me or the self, and then aversions. Therefore, exactly as Nagarjuna says, let on Yamon Nandole, he explained, one can achieve peace or liberation by overcoming the contaminated karma and the delusions. Okay, so how does the karma and delusion arises? Karma arises from the delusions, and the delusions arises from the projection mind or fabricating mind. And that kind of fabricating mind or projection mind arises from the grasping of that object to exist from its own side. Just as he said or explained, if we really check with our own experience, that is exactly how it seems to arise. So that is something that we need to do, the exercise ourselves, the meditations, exercise to really, be convinced by our experience, not because Buddha said or Nagarjuna said and they are great beings or enlightened beings, but because they said that, but we confirm with our experience or our analyze our own examinations, and that is part of the meditations. So then you have no doubt, not because he or she said it, but because with your own observation, with your own experience, you have, done the exercise, the meditation, the practice, and, you confirm that was the case with your own experience. So that being the case, if that is how, all the different delusions and disturbing negative emotions arise from the mainly attachment and aversions, and how that attachment and aversions come from that grasping of that, self-grasping, the self by itself or from its own side. Then, when we realize, then we, so that first that is one thing. First, we have to understand that. Now, next subjects of analyze is, does the self exist from its own side as it appear to your mind and the way your mind perceives to exist? Is that Is that how the self exists, or is that appearance and mistaken? Now, up to here, we recognize how different affective emotions arises from this grasping of the self, okay? We kind of recognize, identify that through, again, our own experience, meditations. But that, the grasping of the self to exist from its own side, is that mind mistaken or unmistaken mind? That is, and to find out whether it's mistaken or unmistaken mind, then we have to do exercise whether the self exists, the way it grabs, the way it perceives, whether the self exists from its own side or not. That is the next step of the analysis, the meditations. If the self do not exist the way it perceived and the way it appeared, then that means that mind is distorted. Mistaken mind. That means it's mistaken and distorted mind, therefore it's ignorance. Something that is a distorted mind, mistaken mind, can be overcome. Can be overcome. Something that is not true is only a matter of time before it gets completely exposed. It cannot hide for long enough. So, but if the self exists the way it appeared, the way it perceived, then of course that means that is not that means it is not mistaken mind. If it's not mistaken mind, then it can't be ignorance. If it's not ignorance and not mistaken mind, then that means we cannot get rid of that. If we cannot get rid of that, then all the other delusions that arise from that cannot be rid of that completely. So therefore, that is where on that, trying to understand what is the true nature of the self? How does the self exist or do not exist? And as well as the others aggregates, that make the self, our own aggregates, our physical aggregates, our feeling aggregates, our distinguishing mental factors aggregates, compositional factor, mental factors, and consciousness. Also, how do they exist or how they do not exist, and then all rest of all phenomena. So that is the way the house should go on that. Okay. So again, there are so many different translations of Sutra, so I'm going to use just what we have here, because that is something that you use. So and traditionally, most of the commentaries, they go in very details, explaining word by words, I don't think we have time to do that, and I don't think I will be going through that, And the subject of this sutra, the emptiness, and the wisdom relies on the emptiness. is the very essence of all the Buddha's teachings. Therefore, that is what even the title is called, the heart. You can say the essence or heart sutra. Most important part is the heart in our organs. Similarly, that wisdom relies on emptiness, and the object of that wisdom, that emptiness, is the very heart of all the Buddha's teaching and the practice. Is the essence of all the Buddha's teaching and the practice. Because all the teachings and practice the Buddha taught and gave are to help us to reduce and overcome those afflictive emotions. All are given to help us to reduce and overcome those afflictive emotions, the obscurations, inner obscurations. Directly, indirectly, it's all given for that purpose. Because those afflictive emotions are the root of our problems, others, root of suffering with that. And therefore, given for that. And the most powerful antidote to overcome those afflictive emotions is that wisdom relies on the emptiness. The wisdom relies on the emptiness. That's the most powerful tools, antidotes to overcome and eliminate and destroy those afflictive emotions. And so, so it's a very short sutra, one of the very most short sutra, but it contains the very heart, most important, the heart and the essence of all the Buddha's teaching and the practice. So that is even from the title, in terms of the word, it's very. In terms of the word, it's very not so many, but in terms of the content, then most important. Yeah, so the Sutra of Heart of the Perfection of Wisdom, Arya Bhagavati Prasna Paramita Shitaya Sutra. So again, in traditional, you will find explanation of each of those words. I don't think we need to go. Okay. I prostrated the other people, James. That is not part of the actual sutra itself. Is the translator, when they translate from Sanskrit to Tibetan, then the translator pay homage. Okay. Then in terms of the actual sutra itself, then we can understand, at the very beginning, it starts with the introductions, and then the actual sutra, where the conversations, question, answer start. In the sutras, those have been translated in Tibetans. All sutras, or most of them, start with the introductions. I think some other translation that I heard, like in Chinese translation and Japanese, which also was based on Chinese translations, they don't have the introductions. They start from the actual conversations. So here, thus did I hear one time. So that clearly seems, with this, that whoever is reciting that, that means it wasn't written by Buddha himself. Okay, someone's recollecting what they heard, at one time. So in this, in the introductions, there is a common introduction, uncommon introductions. The common introductions you find in all sutras similar, and the uncommon is special, what made in here, specifically what made, how come into this conversation, what made that conversation happens. So, so here, the person who is recollecting here by saying, thus I did here one time, there are two different traditions. One which was Ananda, who is recollecting this, okay? Ananda was the Buddha's cousins, and he was also his attendant, spent with Buddha most of the time, more than 25 years. And Ananda is known for his memory among his disciples. Some of the Buddha's main disciples, they have their own unique qualities, different unique qualities. Shariputra is known for his wisdom. Mangalyana is known for his psychic power, and Ananda is known for his memory, So there is one commentary tradition that says is the Ananda, Haribhadra, one of the early Indian masters, he is the one who says it's Ananda. And then there are others who think it is not Ananda, it's a Vajrapani, because it's a Mahayana teachings. And so Ananda, being not bodhisattvas, so therefore someone who's recollecting a Mahayana teaching should be someone who is a Mahayanist. So there is that. But then those who hold as Ananda, some says, Ananda is actually, even though it shows the aspect of, non-Mahayana, but he's actually in reality is a manifestation of both sattvas, And some others says, yeah. So anyway, maybe let's not go too much in that. I guess maybe, yeah. Whether it's Ananda or Vajrapani, it doesn't matter. Okay, was collected. So that's the one time, and sometimes it's okay. The Bhagwan was adoring the massive Bolshan mountain in Rajgir together. So here, Bhagwan is the Buddha, and then where the Sutra was given, he was at the massive Bolshan mountain in a particular, there's a city called Rajgir, and it is a little further from that on the mountains. So there is massive Bolshan mountains. Okay. So that was the place. So sometimes it is called the for excellent time, excellent place, excellent teachers, the Buddha, the place, excellent place is this Vulture Mountain in Rajgir, and then excellent audience. So that is great community of monks and great community of bodhisattvas. And here, great community of the monks is called great because, those who are there are arhat. Most of them are arhat, 500 arhat, and many others. And the great community of bodhisattvas, such as Avalokiteshvara, Vajrapani, and others, celestial beings, humans, non-humans, many others. So that's the audience. Okay, the excellent organs. Hmm? Okay. At that time, so while all the disciples was gathered there in that place, the Buddha was there, in many other sutras they explain first Buddha, most time Buddha go in morning, to bake the food, and after they have the food, and then gathers, and then all the disciples gather, and then normally he give the teachings. So at that time, so everyone's there, but one was observed in the concentration on category of phenomena for profound perceptions. So here, basically, profound perceptions, meaning the wisdom realized in emptiness. Okay. Profound is the object, the emptiness. Perception is the subject, the wisdom realized in the emptiness. And emptiness is profound because, as it says, you cannot express by words or by concept exact what emptiness you have to experience it. You can describe close, but not exactly. You cannot describe by word and concept real exact when you have direct realizations. Cannot be so. It's extremely profound. So here it is explained the Buddha is always in the deep meditative concentrations, meditative equipoise all the time. One of the unique qualities of Buddha is, the bodhisattvas, even the high bodhisattvas, when they are in deep meditative concentrations or meditative equipoise, then they cannot engage into the act of directly helping benefiting other sentient beings, the post-meditative activities. They cannot engage simultaneously. When they engage in post-meditative equipoise activities such as directly in actions helping benefiting others, they can't be in the deep meditative concentration or equipoise. On the other hand, the Buddha is able to function those simultaneously same times all the time. While is in the meditative equipoise, deep meditation, concentration, meditative equipoise, simultaneously be able to benefit in actions, help others, that both simultaneously. Even that is the case, but here is the way they describe is that it seems like here the Buddha is actually now going to deep meditation on this wisdom realized, concentration of wisdom realizing emptiness. And so if Buddha just show that aspect, but in reality he's always in that state. But to the audience, he showed that he was going in the deep meditations. But normally he's in deep meditation, even though even when he seems like he's laying down or speaking with someone, talking, even in that he's in that same deep meditations. That is the one of the qualities of the Buddhas, to be able to do that. So also at that time, at the same time, the Buddha showed the aspect of going that deep meditations. The Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara, So Avalokiteshvara, is the Buddha of compassion. but sometimes he showed the aspect of bodhisattva as well, and especially when he's around the Buddhas, Shakyamuni Buddha, historical Buddha Shakyamuni, show the aspect of the bodhisattvas. Here, it show the aspect of the bodhisattvas. So. Bodhisattva Master Avalokiteshvara look upon the very practice of profound projection of wisdom. So he also went in that, contemplated and meditated on the, emptiness, and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of hidden. As he contemplated, as he meditated, as he analyzed the nature of the self and nature of the five aggregates, and then having analyzed, then he also went in the meditations on the selflessness or emptiness of the emptiness of five aggregate and the person as well. Here when it says also empty of inherent nature, beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent. When you say also, then it means, you hold something as empty of inherent nature, not only that, but also the five aggregates. So the persons, the self, being empty of inherent nature, not only the person or the self is empty of inherent nature, even the basis of the persons, the five aggregates, are also empty of inherent nature, beholding. And so with that, then in that, it explains the subtlessness of the emptiness of person and the selflessness or emptiness of the phenomena, in a brief. The emptiness or selflessness of persons, and the phenomena here is the aggregates, okay. So I think maybe when we come, we will discuss more. It's interesting, these conversations, how this sutra starts. Shariputra asking the questions, and Avalokiteshvara giving the answer. And it's mainly their discussions. And at the end, Buddha authentified, saying that whatever how Avalokiteshvara explained and how he taught, it is exactly as he said, saying that was accurate. Now, so there must be some kind of, feel like reasons why Buddha blessed among all the disciples, because in that audience there are so many bodhisattvas, so many different arhats. He blessed two of them to engage in these discussions. Of course, I haven't seen or in any commentary, but in a recent time, a thought came in my mind. Maybe there must be some reason for Buddha to choose those two to have that two conversations. Because Shariputra is known for his wisdom, so he will be the right person to ask the question on wisdom, on emptiness. Because among all his disciples, Shariputra is known for his wisdom. And why choose Avalokiteshvara instead of Manjushri or Vajrapani, especially Manjushri also being? And I feel because Avalokiteshvara present the compassions, because he is the Bodhisattva, the Buddha of the compassions. So one which represents the wisdom, one which represents compassion, to show the importance of those two factors. the wisdom and compassion. And the main practice of the bodhisattvas is the compassion and wisdom going hand to hand. You know, you cannot neglect one of them. They both are equally important. You need the both wing of the wisdom and the wing of the compassion. You know, so I wonder whether there is, you know, that to emphasize, you know, the importance of the union of the wisdom and compassion. Even when he bless two discussions, he bless those two which represent those two qualities. Okay, so we'll have a break. Okay. Sanjo Sanjo Moshe Maya Fana Jay Wanya Fana Ole Kondu Gero. Yes. Please, please.
No one's asked for it.
Okay. um, so in that particular place in Vulture Peak on Rasgir, Buddha was there, surrounded by all the disciples at that time. And then Buddha showed the aspect of going in that deep meditation concentrations on the wisdom realizing emptiness or perception of profound perceptions. At the same time, the Bodhisattvas, Avalokiteshvara also reflected, contemplated, and saw the self and five aggregate to be empty of inherent nature, so that up to there. And then through the power of the Buddhas, so the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Master Avalokiteshvara. So the Shariputra asked this question, but he didn't ask by his own power. It's through the power and the blessing of the Buddha. So Buddha blessed him to ask the questions and bless the Avalokiteshvara to answer. So that is where bless and inspire to start these conversations. And that is why this become part of the sutras. Even though Buddha didn't spoke himself directly, all this, even though he didn't spoke directly by himself, but through his meditations, in that deep meditations, that he inspired and empowered them to start a conversation. So it is a so that So the question was, how should any son of the lineage train who wish to practice the activities of profound professional wisdom? So, asking how should anyone, son or daughter, or any persons, any beings, who has this lineage. Here, the lineage is called, is those who are inclined to the Mahayana teachings and practice, and whose Mahayana lineage has been awakened. A Mahayana lineage being awakened, it means someone who have cultivated the compassion. That's the Mahayana lineage being awakened. Someone whose compassion has been awakened, and because of their compassion being awakened, so therefore they have inclinations to pursue the Bodhisattva's path, Mahayana path. And for those who are on that, inclination and interest to pursue the Mahayana path, Bodhisattva path, for those who are interested in training the path, the Bodhisattva path, such as the practice of 6 perfections or 10 perfections, and especially, who are interested to cultivate the wisdom, perfection of wisdom realizing emptiness. And through that, by cultivating wisdom realizing emptiness, how should they train and progress on the path, to fully enlightenment? So that was the caution asked, So we have to understand, the Buddhist studies, they explain about 5 paths, and especially when it comes to Mahayana, then 5 paths and bhumis, so you progress, you progressively or gradually progress from one path to another path. So the path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, path of no more learning. That's the result. When you reach the path of no more learning, then that's when you become fully enlightened, fully awakened. Because you have become fully awakened, fully enlightened, there's no more to learn. That's the result. To reach that result, you have to go through the path of accumulations, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditations. That is gradual progress on the path. And by engaging in the practice, and then once you reach path of seeing, then from that, then you progress the 10 bhumis. And by engaging in the practice of 10 paramitas. And 10 paramita related to 10 bhumis. Okay, so here the questions are asked, the Sherab asking questions, how those whose Mahayana lineage have been awakened and who have inclination to path and interest in that, who want to train in that path, how should they train on the path? By cultivating that wisdom. So that was the question asked, and then the answer is given by the Avalokiteshvara. Again, the answer given by the Avalokiteshvara is also through the blessing and power by the Buddha, empowered by the Buddha to give the answer. So that is. Okay. he said that, so that means Shariputra said that, or asked that question. And then the Bodhisattvas, Mahasattva, Aryapalokeshwara, said this to Venerable Shariputra, so again, he gave the answer to the Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wish to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly, beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. So, by understanding, correctly, that the self or the persons is empty of inherent nature. Not only the persons or the self is empty of inherent nature, but also the five aggregates, which are the basis of that persons, are also empty of inherent nature. So one should understand that correctly. And once you have understood correctly, then you try to meditate on repeatedly again and again and again. Correctly and repeatedly. First you should try to have a correct understanding of the emptiness of the self, the emptiness of the aggregates. And once you have correct understanding that, then you try to meditate on that repeatedly, until you develop the realizations to the highest point and achieve full enlightenment. So as we make progress on the path, on the Bodhisattva path, there are two kinds of Bodhisattvas. There is Bodhisattvas who are sharp faculty and Bodhisattvas who are less sharp faculties. Okay. The Bodhisattvas who have sharp faculties, first they have realization and emptiness, and then they have bodhicitta. And once they have the bodhicitta mind realization, then you enter the Mahayana path. That's when you enter the Mahayana path. That's when you enter the first path, the path of accumulations. When you have the bodhicitta mind arising in your mind, spontaneously, effortlessly, day and night. That is induced by great love and compassion, Induced by great love and compassion, then you have this strong inspiration to achieve enlightenment in order to be greatest benefit and help to each and every sentient beings. That aspirations, the wish to achieve that enlightenment, that has been induced by incredible, great compassion and loving kindness. And when you have that such mind, not when you meditate, and when you don't meditate, you don't have, but when you have that mind, effortlessly, day and night, spontaneously, then that is when we call it that you have achieved the realization of bodhicitta. Realization of bodhicitta is when you have that spontaneous, effortless feeling that day and night. At the moment when we try to meditate, put effort, maybe we might feel that a little bit, but when we don't meditate, we don't put effort, we don't feel that way. But as you meditate, continue to practice, then slowly, even when you don't meditate with effort, full conscious effort to generate that, one will start to feel that more and more. And then eventually you reach a point without any effort. Of course, At the very beginning, a lot of effort, and slowly, as we improve, less and less effort. It requires less and less effort. And it becomes more and more natural feeling that way. And then you reach a point where you don't require any effort. You just, when you feel any suffering sentient beings, you just feel that effortlessly, spontaneously. And that is when you achieve the bodhicitta mind. And so when you first achieve, have bodhicitta realization, that is when you enter the first path. You enter the mind path, the first path of accumulations. And before they have that bodhicitta mind, for the bodhisattvas who are sharp mind, first they have the realization emptiness. Because before they generate the wish to achieve enlightenment, because the way their mind, they will analyze whether enlightenment is possible or not. And part of that process, and then that you learn about emptiness. You know enlightenment possible when you begin to understand the emptiness. When you understand emptiness, the true nature of the self and phenomena, then you begin to see how that mind, we talked this morning, is ignorance, is distorted mind. You realize that is distorted mind, that is mistaken mind, because you have understood what the true reality is, what the true nature of self and other phenomena. And when you realize that is totally distorted and ignorant, mistaken mind, then you begin to see the possibility of overcoming all the delusions by overcoming that ignorance. By overcoming the ignorance and all the afflictive emotions, all the obscuration, then you see the possibility of enlightenment. And when you see the possibility of enlightenment, then it gives them the enthusiasm and inspiration to achieve that because it's possible. And through that, then they put effort in the bodhicitta mind, and through that, then they progress and then they develop. First, they have realization emptiness first, then bodhicitta. For the bodhisattvas who are less sharp-minded, like people have, some people are more hard, some people are more here, head. Some people more head, some people more heart, some people both, and so it's like that, some bodhisattvas are more heart, less head. So, first they feel the love, compassion, and then through that develop bodhicitta mind. Having developed that bodhicitta mind, they enter the first path, and then, or even before that, they could meditate and contemplate on emptiness, but the realization of emptiness comes later. First, the realization of bodhicitta comes first. So there are two kinds of approach, two different approach and path. Either way, you need to develop both bodhicitta and wisdom. The only is which one first, and it depends on individual. It depends on individual. Some people are, very kind, compassionate, caring, loving by nature, because from the past imprint, But maybe they have more difficulty with the wisdom part, emptiness. Maybe they might, in such, maybe you might need to give more attention to that. Some people are really good at here, they can understand intellectually, they're all easy, but they have difficulty opening their mind, their heart. Maybe they should focus on the heart in that cases, because those two have to go together. The wisdom and compassion have to go together all the time. So anyway, so there is two different approach in terms of entering the path. First, wisdom realizing emptiness, or first bodhicitta mind. But either way, you have to develop both of them That is the key. And throughout the path, the path of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditations, we go in hand together with the method and the wisdom. During the meditative, equipoise, you concentrate more on the wisdom. During the post-meditative concentrations or equipoise, then you focus on the method. And through that, then you create merit, and through that, then you go together, meditative, post-meditative meditative equipoise, post-meditative equipoise, meditative equipoise, post-meditative equipoise always go together, like that. During the post-meditative equipoise, you pay more attention on the method, the love, compassion, bodhicitta, the practice of generosity, and all others. And during the post-meditative, then is the wisdom. So again, that is how you make progress on the path, And when you make from one jump to the next jump, from one path to another path, is through the wisdom that you make one jump from one path to another path is through the wisdom that is supported by the method, Okay, maybe it might come later. Yeah, so here, that is where I was correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates, also as empty of inherent nature. And here, as I mentioned before, also, in some of the commentary, they explain, not only each of aggregates individually are empty of inherent nature, but all five aggregates collectively are also empty of inherent nature. You see some commentaries when they explain about the also. Also here mean, not only individually, each of those aggregates are empty of inherent nature, but also the five aggregates as collectively, they are also empty of inherent nature. According to some commentary, you see that. But His Holiness Dalai Lama, he explained about not only the self of the person is empty of inherent nature, but also the basis of that self, the aggregate, are also empty of inherent nature. And I think that's make more sense, because when we study all the sutras as well as all the Indian commentary, the presentation of emptiness is always starting with the emptiness of the self and emptiness of phenomena. And then in presentation in terms of meditation, that is also how it is. And so therefore, His Holiness Dalai Lama explained, in the first turning wheel of the Dharma, Buddha gave teaching on selflessness of the persons. Okay, but the selflessness of the persons more on growth level. That is the self that is empty of, of course, they can be, I don't know whether it make more complicated, but then, then you have to go detail and then and it takes all the, so anyway, maybe let's just keep it the selflessness is explained there, but more one way of understanding is the selfless, the person is explained in the first turning wheel of Dharma, but more on gross level. In the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, then it explains the subtle level of the emptiness or selflessness of the person and phenomenon. Or another way of understanding is in the first turning wheel of the Dharma, the emptiness of selflessness person is explained, but the selflessness of phenomena is not explained. So therefore here, when it is second turning of the wheel of Dharma, not only the self is empty of inherent nature that I've explained in the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, but also the aggregate are also empty of inherent nature. So that is, that is how one way of understanding that. So before we go to the aggregates, so because it's understanding the selflessness or the emptiness of the person or the self become important, as it is said also, so which is so then this morning, which when we describe about the self-grasping, of that, then we describe, how there is grasp appearance and the perceiving or grasping of the self to exist from its own side by itself, and from there everything starts, in terms of all those disturbing negative emotions. So when you analyze whether there is a self, does the self really exist from its own side, the way it appears to our mind, the way our mind perceives to exist that way, or does the self really exist differently the way they appear and the way it's perceived to exist? So that is the analysis, And then if it exists from its own side, as it objectively from its own side, the way it appeared to mind and the way the mind perceived it, then when you analyze it, it has to be found within the object. If it exists from its own side objectively, then it has to find either within the object or outside of the object. When we say objectively here, the person object, what is that object? If we talk about this iPad, when you talk, if this iPad exists objectively from its own, what is the object? It's those parts, bases, all this, the screen, the everything inside, the nuts and wire, everything that is what objects is that. So it has to be found within that or outside. There's no other possibility. If it exists from its own side objectively. So in terms of person, if it exists objectively from its own side, the object here is the basis, the aggregate. So either it has to find within the aggregate or outside of the aggregate. There's no other possibility. And so next is analyzing whether it can be found within the aggregate or not, or it can be found outside of aggregate. And therefore, that analysis, as Nagarjuna in his Precious Garland, Kibu Samin Chumin, Memin Lumina, Amshaman, Delation, Kibu Comdu, and Damai, Shita, Dijakone, Duje, and Daniel means. In his analysis, he said the persons is neither the water element, earth element, nor water element, nor the fire element, Not the wind element, neither the space element, nor consciousness element. So the aggregates are those, our physical body, the form aggregate, the physical body is made of 4 elements or 5 elements. The earth, the water, the fire, the wind, and space element is made of that. So either it has to find within those, or either you have to find within the consciousness element. And when you analyze that, neither it can be found in that, neither it can be found in the consciousness elements. If we do that, for example, starting with our earth elements, is that, just to give you an example, that make part of the body that make us solid, our bones, and all these kind of things, So if you, in a way, if you try to go, whether my head is me, whether I can find me in my head, whether my neck is me, whether my shoulder is me, whether my hand is me, or whether I can find in that, whether it's in my torso, upper part of the body, lower part of the body. If you scan and go through each of those part of each body, from top to bottom, and see whether that is me, whether that is you, self. If you can find in that, which part of that atom is that you, If you go in that, then again, we cannot pinpoint, we cannot find within our physical aggregate. Not only within the physical aggregate, also in the consciousness aggregate. If we talk about consciousness aggregate, also consciousness aggregate is made out of many moments. First moment is not one, second moment is not one, third moment is not one, fourth moment, fifth moment, each of them is not that particular. If every moment of consciousness is set, then there will be too many consciousness, because in one consciousness, there are so many moments in there. But if only one moment is there, then you have to say why other moments are not, why this moment. And also that one moment you find within the consciousness cannot be consciousness, because it cannot function as consciousness without the other moments. Are you clear? Just to give you an example, because that helped me to me myself, it helped me, and it helped me because one time I had to do some recording, for our school, at the monastery at the school, And so when I went to the recording studio, so then that is when I saw, in the frequency, like one word, there's, I don't know how many thousands of that make that sound. To make that sound, there's, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of this small frequency that make the sound. Even the sound seems to us one moment, very quick one moment, but actually there's thousands of moments that make that. Each frequency moment is not the sound. Same with, you can think consciousness like that. Consciousness, whatever consciousness that perceived object is just like but there is hundreds and thousands of that moment there that make that. And each of those moments is not that consciousness. Each of those moments does not have the ability to perceive the object by itself without depending on all others moments of that. And so when you do that, then again, you cannot find neither this first frequency, second, third, fourth, none of that is that consciousness. And so again, you cannot pinpoint, and you cannot say this is the self, the I, or me, Nor you can find within the collection of it, or within the continuum of that. So when you do that analyze, the self that you felt so strongly before, I or me self, so concrete, so solid, so real, existing from its own side objectivity, when you do that kind of, ultimate analysis, then, you cannot find within the object at all. It cannot be found. Therefore, the self cannot exist ultimately, because the ultimate mind, because it cannot be found by ultimate analysis. That is the way of analyzing ultimately. Because it cannot be found by ultimate analysis, therefore it can't be ultimately existing. Therefore is empty of ultimate existence. Since it cannot be found within the object, therefore it cannot exist objectively from its own side. Therefore is empty of existence from its own side objectively. One very kind of classical example that you find in, teaching on emptiness. They give you an example of, in certain time of the day, a little bit dark, not completely dark, but starting to be dark, not so very clear, but also it's not completely dark. And then there is a roll, that is kind of roll in a certain way. And then this time you might feel, oh, there is a snake, because it's not so clear, because the distance, because the light and the rope, the shape of the rope, the way the rope is curling like that way, and someone might think, oh, there's a snake. So there is a belief there's snake there, objectively there. Based on the belief that there's snake, then if someone is afraid of snake, then there's fear arises. That's why other negative emotion, disturbing emotions, such as here, the fear arises. The fear arises based on mistaken mind. Mistaken mind, distorted mind. Even there is no snake, but your mind perceived to be there is snake existing there. And if you go closer, then you realize there is no snake. So if you analyze, then you cannot find a snake in each part of the rope. Neither you can find the snake, the collection of each of those parts, neither in continuity of that rope. You cannot find the snake in any of that. You cannot find atom of snakeness, of snake in that rope. Either in each of those parts that makes rope, neither the collection of each part that makes rope, neither the continuity of the rope you cannot find at all. Therefore, there is no snake existing from its own side there. Absolutely. There's no snake existing objectively from its own side. There's no snake existing from its own side objectively there at all. It's totally, completely mistaken. Same, the self, the persons, is like that. When even though it appear to our mind, just as that rope appeared to mind because of our previous imprint, strong imprint from the past, and because the ignorance still there, ignorance hasn't been removed, and then there is so much imprint of that ignorance, and due to not having a realizations of emptiness, due to not having realizations of the true nature of the reality of the self and other phenomena, then due to all these conditions, just like the many conditions make that you feel like there is a snake in the rope, because same way, due to many of these conditions, then the object appear to us, the self here appear to exist from its own side, objectively from its own side. But if you, just like when we do analyze with trying to find the snake in the rope, same way we try to find the person within the object, that is the aggregate, you cannot find in each of those aggregates, you cannot find in each part of those aggregates that makes each aggregate. Neither you find, just like snake cannot find in the collections of aggregates, neither you find in the continuity of that. And so therefore, that is clear indication and sign, that there is no self existing from its own side, existing objectively from its own side. Absolutely. Therefore, the self is empty of inherent nature or independent nature, by existing by its own entity or from its own side by itself. Therefore, since the self do not exist by its own, from its own side objectively, but still there's appearance of existing, inherently existing, therefore that appearance is mistaken. Therefore that appearance is mistaken. And therefore perceiving the object to exist the way it appears is also mistaken. Therefore, that mind that perceives to exist from its own side, the way it appears, is then mistaken mind, is ignorance, is distorted mind. Since it's mistaken and distorted mind, it doesn't have the support of the reality, the truth, therefore it can be overcome. Therefore, it can be overcome. Therefore, liberation is possible. Enlightenment is possible. Therefore, the delusion can be completely eradicated, eliminated. It's possible to do that. So that is, so here now, after we do that analysis, investigation, then we come to understand, oh, the self do not exist from its own side by itself, objectively. Even that is the case, but there is appearance of that. Therefore, that appearance is totally mistaken. Not only the appearance is mistaken, but there is a mind conception that perceived to exist that way. That is also mistaken. Totally mistaken, totally wrong, totally distorted. Therefore is ignorance. Therefore is ignorance. Now you are able to identify why it is ignorant. Do you get it? Before it's like just, oh, we just use the word ignorance. But how it is ignorance, how it is ignorant, how it is misperceived, how it is distorted. But when now, first we analyze how it appeared to our mind, how we perceive that, and then analyze how things exist in here, the self, how actually self exists, and then through understanding of that, then we make these, connections. It's like puzzles that has been, come together and perceive, oh, that is why it is ignorance. That is why it is mistaken. Not because, again, another, regardless of how enlightened they are, not because they said that, but through our own observation, through our own analysis, our own investigations. That is very important. That is very important. Otherwise, one day we feel this, and another time another, we feel, oh, this person is more enlightened, and he or she says something else, then we feel it's that. Our mind keep on changing. So it has to come from your own personal understanding, investigation, analysis, meditations. Not only it can found as, not only it cannot be found in the aggregate. If you try to find the self outside of aggregate, also you cannot find. If you take away is your aggregates, your body, your feelings, your distinguishing mind or discriminating mind, all other mental factors, all other 49 mental factors, which are the conventional factors and the primary consciousness, where you take all of that and can you pinpoint and say, this is me, self, outside of all of that? Can you pinpoint and say, this is self, and that has the functioning of the self or I? We cannot. So it cannot be found either within the aggregate or outside of aggregates with that kind of analysis. Since with that kind of analysis, since it cannot be found within the aggregates, the object, or outside of that object aggregates, then, how can we say the self exists by itself from its own side object? Or we can say, I very strongly feel about it. We can feel strongly about everything, anything. It doesn't necessarily mean it's based on reality. Do you get it? In the world, so many crazy people, because they feel so strongly about certain things. There's nothing really proof or truth in that what they believe, but they believe because they feel strongly about it. And we feel this so strongly about something existing from its own side objectively because we are so familiar with that. We are so familiar with that kind of appearance, and perceiving that way is so familiar with us from the birth until now. And if you go beyond that, from the beginner's lifetime, that is how things appear, how we perceive. So we have become so familiar with that, it's hard to believe that it is different than the way we feel about it. Not because there is a truth in that, not because there is a, reason that is based in truth, but it's just because we feel very strongly about it. So it's more than how you feel about it. The way you feel is the evidence, reason, logic, truth in that. How you feel about it. So that is the meditation analysis, the investigation we try to is, not about how I feel about it, but really how things really exist. What is the reality? What is the truth what is the truth? How the thing exists. Keeping away our feelings. When we bring that feelings, and we can, like everything, it can be biased. And so that is where so that was where so when you cannot, with that kind of analyze, when you cannot find either within and outside of that, then how can you say that it exists from its own side or objectively? Because if something exists from its own side or objectively, when you analyze it, and it's true, if that appearance is true, the way it appeared, then it has to be found within the object, but it cannot be found within the object, nor outside the object. Therefore, the appearance is totally mistaken. So that is the kind of analyzing, that's the meditation. When you try to do meditation, that's how we do. We do that kind of analysis, investigations, analytical meditations. And as you do that slowly, step by step, not rushing, but going step by step, with each of those different steps of, first starting with all your, first, as mentioned, first recognizing how the self exists to our mind and how we perceive the self to exist. First, that identifying that, recognizing that. And the second exercise, if analyzing whether there is such self, the way it appears to, and the way we perceive to exist, existing from its own side objectively. Then next is, if it exists objectively from its own side, then it has to found. And if that is true, then it has to be found within the object. Within the object or outside the object. Within the object means here the aggregates. And then going through each of those aggregates one by one, and trying to see whether you can find within each of those aggregates, And then through that, when you are unable to find within each aggregate, outside of aggregate, within the aggregates, then that there is no self that can be found within the objects, or there is no self that can be found existing on its own side. And when you come to that the self do not exist from objectively or from its own side, sense of empty of self existing objectively or from its own side, then you try to remain in that emptiness, experiencing that emptiness that is totally empty of existing from its own side, existing from objectively, inherently. So yeah. Okay, maybe we'll have another break. Okay. Samjo Samjo Rimbo Mate Panote Ruchi Yewa Nyapa Me Paya Gome Kondu Kewa Shu.
So we have an hour for lunch. Hopefully we can call it lunch. As you know, there's space outside, space there. There's a cafe down the road, but right, 1 hour for lunch. Then we have then at 1:30, so we have an hour for that. An hour later from that. Then we have a discussion about all the teaching so far. So we noted down lots of questions. So that's from 1:30 to 2:15, and then Geshe will join us again at 2:30. It's probably enough information to go with.
Yeah.
Just reinforce.
Yeah, it's really good.